Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I first of all want to start off by thanking everybody who commented and subscribed, and also anybody who simply just watched it. That is the main goal here, to have people watch it and learn about it so that they can spread awareness and maybe even help someone who maybe also in denial like I was for a while. So we're gonna go into the second part today, and I will appreciate it if you guys would just keep watching. Hi guys, alright, so thank you for watching, and I want to start off where we left off, which was I was leaving Mexico to come back to California after the 2 weeks that I was there. And when I came back, it was like the end of October 2016. So I just let 1 month pass, 1 month where all of November actually, just where I would just, I don't want to say deny, but just a little bit of normalcy as much as I could get, to feel like I was back in California, safe where like I grew up. At least that's how I felt at the moment. And so after that, in December of 2016, I started to go to the doctor. I didn't have insurance at the moment, so I had to go to a government hospital called Lgmd that's located in Somewhere, California. And I went to the doctor and everything, and I started to tell the doctor, the whole story that I said over here in Mexico, showing them what I could, what I could not do. And they started to do very similar tests, checking the strength, checking how I would get up from the floor or from a sitting position. They didn't necessarily sit me on the floor, but they asked me, about it. And then I showed them how I would get up from a chair, how I would walk, how my arms could not carry certain heaviness, or like I couldn't lift them all the way up like how I used to. And so they also had me, what did they do? Oh yeah, they had me do the Lgmd again, the same thing that I had in Mexico, because I did bring all the tests, in paper form that they had done in Mexico, but unfortunately, because they were in Spanish, they did try to get them translated, but they said it was probably going to take too long. So then they ended up doing the tests all over again themselves. And they got some of the same conclusions, but they didn't really ever tell me. Like, they asked me, like, what did the doctors in Mexico tell you? And then I told them that they had said that I probably had Lgmd. And they were like, did you know what type? And I was just like, oh, no. Like, I didn't know there was types. And they were like, yeah, there's many subtypes. As of right now, I think there's 30 or 32. I could be wrong. There could be more. But it's around the 30s of the type of subtypes that there are. But I wasn't aware at the time, because I did, after I left Mexico in November, I did have the temptation to look it up and start researching. I'm pretty sure a lot of us do it, and whenever we think we have something, or whenever we know we have something, we start looking at, stories or research papers, or just what's out there about that illness that you have. So I did have that temptation, but I didn't all of November. But in December, after the doctor had told me that there was many subtypes, and that they were going to do their best to figure out which one I had, because unfortunately for some people it's really hard, because they think that there's many more subtypes than the ones that they have found, but it's going to take a while to figure that out, because like I had said, this is a genetic disorder, so you have to look through all the genes that make up your muscles to figure out which ones are not working properly and which ones are, to determine the subtype. So after he had told me that, then that is when I started to Google research it. And it was not the best thing to do, and never is the best thing to do, to go and research it. But especially when you don't know much about it, when you don't know what subtype you have, when you don't know all the specific details, I feel like once you do know, there is good in researching and in finding people who tell their stories, for example me, or just any support that you could get out there. But once you do know the specific thing that you have, because if you do it before that, you're just going to torment yourself. At least that's what I did to myself. I tormented myself with all the images and all the millions of possibilities of things that can happen to me. And that overwhelmed me and that scared me. And there was moments that I did not want to continue going to the doctor to get, my checkups or to do this test or to do that test anymore, because I was just like, what's the point? At that point, when I did start to research it, I didn't tell the doctor, but I did, to myself, I was just like, what's the point of going to the doctor if I'm just gonna end up in a wheelchair? I'm just gonna end up, not moving from my bed, not moving my arms, not moving my legs, not moving, at all. So what's the point of going to the doctor? I already know where I'm gonna end up. Do I really have to go so the doctors keep telling me and putting it in my head and making me feel worse? And that's how I saw things, unfortunately. But I didn't. I continued going. And I think that has a lot to do with my parents and my husband. With my parents, I just want to mention that, they only knew what I told them. The only person that knew everything was my husband, because he was the one who would go to me to the doctor's appointments. He would not miss one doctor's appointment. God bless his soul for accompanying me to each and every appointment. So my parents, going back to my parents, they only knew what I would say. I would just say, we still don't know what it is. It just seems that I'm losing some strength, but I think things will be fine. I mean, nothing else is wrong with me. Everything else is perfect. It's just that. But we'll see. And they would keep asking me questions, but I would just repeat the same thing. And I would put up a front of being happy and being strong. I mean, in front of them, I just kept living my life as if nothing was wrong. Because I have always been the person who, when it comes to my parents, I've seen their struggle. I've seen how messed up sometimes life has been to them. And so I had never wanted to bring any more burden or any more sadness into their life. So I always tried to protect them as much as possible. So going back to the doctor, like I said, thankfully because of them and because of my husband, I didn't stop going. But I think that after they had done the EMG, the last test that they did was, what was it? It was a genetic test where they had me spit into a little tube. I don't know if you guys have seen those tests, like right now for COVID, that sometimes, I think there has been some tests where you spit into a tube, and then there's other tests. Well, I don't know, for the ancestry test, the famous, you pay $100 and you send your spit to Ancestry and they tell you about all your ancestors. So the same, you basically spit in a tube and they take your DNA. And that was the last test that they did. And they were gonna ship it off to, I think, Kansas? I might be wrong. I'll have to look back at that. But yeah, they were going to ship it off to another state where they had a laboratory that specialized in that, trying to figure out, the genetic mutations that could lead to limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. So then we were waiting months and months. I mean, besides that, they had told us it was going to take possibly 6 months. Yeah, I think it was possibly 6 months that it was going to take. And something ended up happening. I think it got lost, or I don't know what happened at the end of the day. But the point is that time was passing and, nothing was being done. I wasn't being told anything. So thankfully, there an opportunity, I think, because my husband at his job, he was in the job through an agency. And the opportunity opened up for him to become part of the company in 2017. There was an opening for us to get insurance through his job, through his employment. So we did that, and let's see, that was I don't know if it was March, April, around March or April where we did that. And when we 6 months hadn't yet passed from the whole test that was sent to Kansas from all of you. So we then got insurance through his employment, and it was to go to Kaiser Permanente, located in Panorama City. And when I went there, what was the first? Okay, yeah. So you know how you do your like when you go to any new insurance, they have you do like your first exam, like you like a physical exam where they check you and they just see like if you need help with anything. So I went to that first exam and made it a priority to make that appointment as soon as possible. And so thankfully I was able to get all the paperwork from all the exams that I had done at all of you, and I got them transferred directly to Kaiser Permanente. So the neurologist that I started seeing at Kaiser, you know, she got everything down and she didn't have to redo a lot of the tests that they had done. Keep in mind, they had not diagnosed me yet. We were still in the process trying to see if I did have what, you know, the doctors in Mexico told me that I might have. And one other thing that they did differently at Kaiser, they started to tell me more about the subtypes, and they didn't know exactly which one I had, but they had 2A or 2B in mind, and they explained to me a little bit of the difference of both, but they were leaning more towards 2A based on everything that I was showing. And so they had also mentioned to me that most of the time in Lgmd, it only affects your muscles from your legs, mainly like the hips to the thigh, and then your arms from your shoulders to like your elbow, like this muscle right here. This muscle right here. I can't even do that anymore. And so they were like, but then there's also a possibility that it could affect your heart, since it is a muscle close to your upper body, you know, your arms, and depends how bad it goes through here. It could also affect your heart, and it could also affect your lungs. So the next two tests that they wanted to do, just to check on me, make sure everything was fine, in case that is what I had, they wanted to do a lung test. To do a test on my lungs called spirometry, which basically measures the amount of air that your lungs can hold, and with how much pressure, how much strength you can push air out. And so when I took that test, it was pretty, I guess, scary for me, because like I mentioned in my previous video, I have anxiety. So when it comes to like breathing or showing, like holding my breath or doing any kind of test with my lungs or my breath, I freak out, I panic. So that made that scary, although it is not something that, you know, hurts or you know, or just causes pain. So after I had done that test, I think that the doctor said my lungs seemed pretty fine. They weren't at what they should be, like 100%, but they weren't bad to the point that they were worried about me. They probably thought that because of my anxiety, because I did mention that maybe that was causing, you know, the tests to not come out at the level that they wanted them to come out. And then the second to last test that they did was a echocardiogram, which is basically an ultrasound of your heart. You don't have any, you know, usual heartbeat rhythms, just anything wrong with your heart. And thankfully, that test came out perfectly fine. So after all of that, at Kaiser, the last test that I had to do was a genetic test. But this time, instead of spitting through a tube, what my doctors told me was that they wanted me to go see a specialist that they had that was also part of Kaiser Permanente, but was located in LA, in the Kaiser Permanente in LA. And after seeing them, that they were going to recommend me to get this blood test done, where they would take my blood and they would take my mom's and my dad's blood, so that they could go through their DNA and my DNA and see if they had passed down the gene that is needed in order to have Lgmd. And usually through that test, they can also find the subtype, the specific type that I have. So I went to the doctors in LA, and they had all the tests. They had every single thing that I had done already up to that point. So they didn't mention Lgmd anymore. They just wanted to get to know me and see what I could physically still do. So, you know, they checked my strength, they made me walk, they made me lift up my arms, they made me sit up and down, and they made me show them how I got around, how if I was in a chair, how would I get up? Or if I was on the bed, you know, at the hospital or at the clinic, how would I get off? And just regular things that I would do day to day, they try to see how I would get them done. It came time to do the genetic test, and I had to ask my parents. Thankfully, through the insurance that I had at Kaiser, they didn't have to pay for anything. They just had to show up, give them their name, their date of birth, and all the information that they asked of them, and then they would take their blood and send it to the specialist to get it looked at and see what subtype and if it is that I have Lgmd. And so the doctors originally told me, those two doctors in LA told me that they were going to have me go back to their office to give me the results. And what actually ended up happening was that the neurologist in Panorama City, the one here where I go to more regularly, she got the results. I guess they both got the results on the same day, but the ones from LA had to call me to schedule an appointment, and the neurologist from Panorama City, I already had an upcoming appointment with her to just check up, so she took that appointment, which was before the one that I had in LA. She took that appointment to tell me my results over the phone. And I remember, you know, I mean, I had that appointment and I wasn't expecting the results from her. So I picked up all happy and just like, you know, willing to answer any question. Point is that I answered all happily, and then she told me, you know, regular questions that doctors ask you, but then at the very end, well, not at the very end, the main part of the conversation was like, she had my results. It's just like, would you like to know them? And then I told her, yeah, you know, I want to know. And so that phone call, I think that, you know, it had been like a year or a little more. Yeah, no, like a year. Because that was like in June of 2017. 2017, yeah. In June of 2017 when I got that call. That, almost a year of going back and forth. And since the moment that I decided that my family helped me decide and push me to look into this. And it had been a long process, multiple tests, multiple exams, and it was finally like down to that phone call. And something in me wished and prayed and hoped and hung on to the possibility that that was not what I had, and that it was something else that would move on. But unfortunately, she said, it turns out that you do have Lgmd, and to be specific, the subtype is 2A, and it's genetic and it comes from your parents. Both your parents pass down that gene to you, and like I said before, you need both parents to pass down the gene in order to be activated. So like, for example, my brother or my sister, they could end up having one gene, and from my mom, and then from my dad, it'll be the good gene, so they don't present any symptoms, or vice versa. So after she said, you have Lgmd 2A, she started explaining much more information, like what I can do, what I cannot do. But my brain shut off, you could say. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had those moments where you're there but you're not there. Or it was definitely like that moment, like in a movie where the main character gets told they have cancer, or they have, you know, life-threatening disease, and they blank out, like their brain goes somewhere else, and the person that's talking to them, like you can hear them mumble, but you don't quite understand anything they're saying because you're not paying attention at 100%. So it was one of those moments that I never thought that I would have. And everything she said, like, I didn't And she said some pretty, pretty important information, but I didn't pay attention. I just said, oh, okay, thank you. And yeah, I'm just going to go to the appointment that I have in LA, and I'll get more information there. And the doctor's like, oh, well, you took this, pretty strong. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess, So I hang up that conversation, and I remember my husband was with me that day at home. And I just looked at him, and I bursted out into tears. I couldn't even still say it. I just bursted out into tears, and I knew he knew. And I remember my parents, we were living with my parents at the time. So that day in the afternoon, like I composed myself. I stayed in the room. I let everything out, but I composed myself. And then when we went back outside, I think my parents knew something was going on, but they didn't bring it up. And as days passed before I had the other appointment in LA, they kept asking me, oh, do you have any other results yet? The results in yet? Like, have they checked our blood? Like, anything? And I just kept saying, no, nothing yet, nothing yet. But I already knew. And so then it came the day of the appointment in LA, and I had many conversations with my husband and cried many times in private. And I kept telling myself, there's a possibility that this is wrong. Me trying to find a way out, you could say. I kept telling myself, maybe there's a possibility that this is wrong, and the neurologist in LA will say something else. They will tell you the truth. I mean, they were the ones who got the test done. They are the ones who specialize in this, so they will know more. So I went with that mindset to LA. I went hoping for something, or if not, at least hoping for treatment, for help to get better. So we got to LA, and they did it differently. It wasn't a phone call. So I went in person, and they took me to their office. You could say it wasn't a regular consultation room. It was an office, a big desk and everything. And we sat at one end, and me and my husband sat at one end of the table, and then the two doctors sat at the other end. And they both looked really seriously and really with a lot of compassion. They looked at me, and they both told me that the results came back saying that I had Lgmd 2A, and that, they were sorry. And I guess they waited a second after they said that. I don't know, maybe, all people react differently. They were probably waiting for me to react, crying and everything, but I didn't. I composed myself. And this time since I had heard it before from the doctor from Panorama, I didn't black out, you could say. I didn't lose sight of what was going on. Like, I paid attention to everything they said, and I just said, okay, so what are my options, or what can I do? And they said again, like, oh my gosh, you reacted pretty good to this. And then I told them, it's just because, the doctor from Panorama had told me about it already. And they were like, oh, okay. And so they told me, so now, because of that, we have to tell you that unfortunately there is no treatment, and there is, there's no cure, there's no treatment, there's something we can do. The best we could do is offer you physical therapy and to offer you counseling. Another thing we could suggest is MDA, and that's when they presented MDA to me, and the different support groups that they have, and the different events that they have, and other information that they possibly couldn't give to me. And then they did mention that if I ever did want to have children, that the good thing was that at least now I knew that I had it, and if I wanted to see if my husband had it, that he just had to take a simple blood test. So in case I ever did want to have children, that I would know if, since I know I carry it, that I would know if my husband carries it, and then I would know and make the decision if I wanted to have children. Because if me and him have it, then there's a possibility that we could pass it down to our child. So they said, fortunately for some women, being pregnant, the extra weight, the extra muscle that it would take to carry the child could make the progression of the weakness go even faster. So with that in mind, they also mentioned that with physical therapy, there was a, certain physical therapists that I would have to see. And because unfortunately, if I were to go to the gym and lift weights, or if I were to go to try and run, or to try and hike, or to go on a treadmill and try and walk at a fast pace, even though there is a possibility that I could still do it, that if I did push myself too much, that exercise could actually also make the progression go much faster. So basically at that point, what I heard, what my mind took in, was that there was no cure. There was nothing I could do. Just let time pass by and get worse. At the time, I could still walk, I could still go up the stairs, I could still get up by myself, I could still do a lot of things, even like hiking at a very slow pace, but I could still do it. So it just me missing, just me realizing that, I went in there thinking, okay, maybe I don't have it, they made a mistake. Or maybe I do have it, but there's something we can do about it. And getting turned down, by actually having it, and by there being nothing to do about it or to get better, it broke me. When you get hit with all these curveballs that you didn't expect, at such a young age, when I feel like life is barely beginning. I had no children. I was already married, and I have still so many dreams. And to be told that, it just felt like my life was over. There was no point in dreaming, no point in continuing. I was just like, if that's, because you hear you're gonna get worse and there's nothing we can do about it. You come to a point, or maybe you don't, depending on who you are. But for me, it came to a point where I was just like, then what's the point of me being here? Only because for me, there's moments where I accept it all, and I tell myself, well, I have found ways to deal with it, to do the things that I'm no longer able to do. But then a few months pass, or a whole year pass, and I notice something new. I notice more weakness, whether from my legs or from my arms. And then I have to readjust all over again. It's just happening very slowly, You see yourself, you see your body very slowly. You could kind of say, just give up. And it has taken a lot from me, but again, I want to share this story because, like I said, there could be a lot of people out there who feel the same way as me, or has gone through the same thing as me, and has yet to address it or go to the doctors. And all I want to say is that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that we can get through this together. And you know, like, that's life sometimes. There's worse things that can happen to me, so I'm thankful for what I do have. It's taught me to appreciate much more. Alright guys, that was the second part of the story. I'm sorry that I did get a little emotional. I mean, it's been a couple years since my diagnosis, but it doesn't mean it hasn't been hard. But I do want to mention that there has been great times too. Great times with a lot of amazing realizations of the people who are around me and how much they care, and how simply asking for help can go a long way. So next week I will be posting the final part to the story, which is, you know, what happened after my diagnosis and some things that I have gone through since then. So I really appreciate all your support for staying this long and listening to the second part. I hope that you guys have learned something about it. And if you guys know of anybody out there who needs support, please, please, please send them my way. I would love to get to know them. And never forget to appreciate what you do have. Please comment, like, subscribe. Bye.